In less than 50 years, this entire nation will be underwater, gone forever. 12,000 people are watching their homeland disappear inch by inch. Not in some disaster movie, but in real life. Right now, we're talking about Tuvalu, a tiny island nation in the Pacific that's about to become the first country in human history to completely vanish due to climate change. And listen to this, during king tides, salt water doesn't just crash over seawalls, it bubbles up through the ground itself, flooding homes from below. Families wake up to find their floors covered in seawater, their crops are dying, their wells taste like the ocean. But that's not all. These aren't just statistics we're talking about. Entire families are packing up centuries of Polynesian culture into suitcases, knowing their children will never see the place they call home. Imagine having to explain to your kid that the country on their birth certificate won't exist when they grow up. This isn't some distant future problem that might happen if we don't act. The water is rising now. The land is disappearing now. The people are leaving now. Welcome to Tuvalu, the nation racing against time. The reality hits you the moment you step off the plane in Tuvalu. This place is sinking at an alarming rate, and you can see it happening in real time. Here's what makes this so shocking. Sea levels around Tuvalu are rising at 3.9 millimeters per year. That might not sound like much, but it's double the global average. The islands are also slowly sinking as the coral foundation compresses under its own weight, making the problem even worse, and the visual evidence is everywhere. During high tide, salt water literally bubbles up through people's floors. Not because the ocean is crashing over barriers, but because the water table has risen so high that seawater seeps through the coral foundation of the islands. Families are mopping salt water out of their living rooms twice a day. The agricultural crisis is devastating. Crops that have grown here for generations are dying as the soil becomes too salty to sustain life. Taro plants, breadfruit trees, coconut palms, all withering away. The traditional foods that have sustained these communities for over 1,000 years are becoming impossible to grow. Meanwhile, fresh water is becoming a luxury. Wells that provided clean drinking water for decades now taste like the ocean. The lens of fresh water that sits on top of the denser salt water underground is shrinking every year. Some families are already dependent on rainwater collection and imported bottled water. The infrastructure is failing too. The airport runway floods regularly during king tides, stranding visitors and cutting off the island's only connection to the outside world. Roads crack and buckle as salt water undermines the foundations. Government buildings flood from below. But here's the most surreal part. Tuvalu's government officials are literally measuring their disappearing coastline. They've got markers set up around the islands, documenting exactly how much land they lose each month. It's like watching a country conduct its own autopsy in real time. The numbers are staggering. Some areas have lost over 40 feet of coastline in the past decade. Entire sections of villages have been abandoned as the ocean claims them. Families point to spots in the water where their grandparents' houses used to stand. But that's not the most shocking part. What we're witnessing in Tuvalu isn't just an environmental disaster, it's cultural extinction happening in slow motion. Think about this. Over 1,000 years of Polynesian culture is facing complete erasure. The Tuvaluan language, spoken by fewer than 13,000 people worldwide, may die with the islands. When the last native speaker leaves Tuvalu, where will children learn the words for traditional fishing techniques, ancient navigation methods, or the names of coral formations that no longer exist? The migration reality is already here. Families are making impossible choices every day. Stay and watch everything you know disappear, or leave and lose your identity forever. New Zealand has a limited visa program that accepts just 75 Tuvaluans per year. Australia refuses to grant climate refugee status, treating people fleeing rising seas the same as economic migrants. But listen to this. What happens when your nationality becomes meaningless? Tuvalu passports might become collector's items, relics of a country that used to exist. Children born in Auckland or Sydney to Tuvaluan parents will grow up knowing their homeland is underwater. The traditional knowledge disappearing here is irreplaceable. Ancient navigation techniques that helped Polynesian sailors cross thousands of miles of open ocean using only stars, currents, and bird patterns. Fishing methods passed down through generations. Stories and songs that explain how coral atolls form, how to predict weather patterns, how to live in harmony with the ocean. Churches are going underwater too. Not just buildings, but sacred sites that have anchored communities for centuries. Burial grounds where ancestors rest are being claimed by the sea. Imagine watching your family cemetery disappear beneath the waves. The economic collapse is devastating. Tourism, already limited, is drying up as visitors realize they're witnessing a death spiral. The fishing industry that has sustained these islands for generations is failing as coral reefs bleach and die in warming waters. Traditional canoe building skills become pointless when there's nowhere left to sail. And here's the legal nightmare nobody talks about. What happens to citizenship when your country disappears? International law has no precedent for this. Are Tuvaluans stateless? Do they become refugees forever? Who represents their interests in international forums when Tuvalu no longer exists? The global response has been equally shocking. The international attention has been massive, but the actual help, that's a different story. You've probably seen the viral moment. Tuvalu's Prime Minister Simon Kofi addressing the UN Climate Change Conference while standing knee-deep in seawater. The image went everywhere. A world leader literally drowning while giving a speech about his country's survival. It was powerful, symbolic, and completely ignored by the countries that could actually help. Listen to this. At climate conferences, world leaders make big promises. Billions pledged for climate action. Standing ovations for speeches about saving small island nations. But here's what actually reaches Tuvalu. Almost nothing. The money gets tied up in bureaucracy, redirected to larger countries, or spent on studies instead of solutions. Australia's stance has been particularly brutal. Despite being Tuvalu's closest neighbor and one of the world's largest carbon emitters per capita, they refuse to grant climate refugee status to Tuvaluans. They treat people fleeing rising seas the same as economic migrants. Families drowning in slow motion get the same response as someone looking for better job opportunities. New Zealand offers slightly more hope with their Pacific Access Category visa scheme. But remember that number, 75 people per year, for an entire nation of 12,000 facing extinction. The math doesn't work. Meanwhile, there's talk of preserving Tuvalu as a digital nation, virtual reality archives of the islands, digital citizenship, online government services. It sounds futuristic, but imagine telling someone their entire culture will exist only in a computer program, that their children can visit their homeland using VR headsets. The legal precedent being set here is terrifying. Tuvalu is becoming the first test case of climate-induced statelessness. International courts are scrambling to figure out what rights people have when their country literally disappears. The decisions made here will affect millions of people as sea levels continue rising. And here's what really gets me. The corporations most responsible for this crisis are nowhere to be found. Major oil companies have known about climate change for decades. They've got the resources to relocate entire populations, but they're spending their money on lobbying and legal fees instead. Time is running out faster than anyone expected. The timeline is brutal. Scientists estimate 30 to 50 years before complete submersion. That means children born in Tuvalu today might watch their birthplace disappear before they turn 40. But here's the thing that should terrify all of us. Tuvalu is just the first domino. But Maldives, Marshall Islands, Kiribati, they're all facing the same fate. We're looking at the preview of climate change's real impact on human civilization. This isn't about polar bears or melting glaciers anymore. It's about 12,000 people becoming the world's first climate refugees. Entire cultures vanishing, languages dying, nations disappearing from maps. The question that keeps me up at night: how will history judge our response to this crisis? Future generations will look back at this moment when we watched an entire country drown and ask what we did to help. Right now, the answer is almost nothing. These families didn't cause climate change, but they're paying the ultimate price for it. They're losing everything while the rest of us debate whether the problem is even real. This isn't just about an island. It's about what we, as a global community, value, and what we choose to ignore. What do you think the world should do for Tuvalu? Should Australia and New Zealand open their borders to climate refugees? Should major polluters pay for relocation costs? Drop your thoughts below. For more stories that matter, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell, because these conversations need to happen before it's too late.